Food heist.
Yes. Do you remember? We talked about this, I think, in January, about the fake trucking company that stole a bunch of steaks
Yes.
and hot tubs.
Steaks and hot tubs. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I believe they have struck again.
Ooh, the meat blenders. Making steak steak baths.
The backyard partiers.
Mm.
Yeah, so this happened in late March, so just a couple weeks ago at time of recording. 2 tractor trailers picked up 40,000 pounds of beef each, so 80,000 pounds of beef. The journalist here has very politely pointed out that this is enough to make 320,000 quarter pounders.
Very nice, yes. That's
picked them up from a slaughterhouse and then disappeared.
Okay.
They had forged the shipping papers and then they just disappeared again. So same MO as before.
Beef bandits have struck again. What are the beef bandits doing with all of this meat?
Well, and how did they run out so quickly?
Yeah, that's the big question. I mean, obviously, they're not just selling it. There's something more.
That would
be ridiculous. Have they found like a pit full of monsters that need to be fed?
They're keeping them sated to protect the rest of humanity.
Are these heroes that know that if the monsters in this rift ever get out, that all of humankind will be destroyed?
That is actually the plot of a Dean Koontz book called Midnight Meat Train, which is such a brilliant title. It's not about food heist. It's about a serial killer. And when the guy finally catches the serial killer, he says, "Now it's your job to keep them, satisfied." And he realizes that underneath the city, there's all these monsters, and he has to become the new serial killer to keep them.
I mean,
content.
That idea seems to percolate sometimes, right? Because I remember as a kid watching some sort of show that I feel was like a short story that had been turned. It was some one of those things like Tales from the Crypt or Outer Limits or something like this, where the internet may have to tell me what it is. There was a guy who found that if he it was like a well or some sort of construction site, and if you lowered animals down, something happened to them, and it came up full of like gemstones or gold nuggets or something like that. And it's the whole story of him, kind of Audrey 2 style, finding out that if what he lowers down, what they have a taste for, he'll get paid better and better and better, and eventually moving on to people and putting them down. And then, of course, I can't remember the ending, but I would assume he ends up getting eaten by the monsters, because that's how that sort of story ends.
Yeah.
So the beef bandits have found a rift in space-time full of monsters that have a taste for flesh.
And they are the bastion that is keeping humanity alive.
Yep.
We should all be grateful to them.
Bandits is not a good term for them, right? They're actually heroes. So we'll have to think of something else for the beef bandits.
The hamburger heroes.
The hamburger heroes. Hamburger heroes. And,
and I think for all the hard work they're doing, they deserve some hot tubs.
Yeah, that's true. That must be what it is.
Yeah.
They had, they needed to relax. It's really hard work feeding these monsters in the rift. Millions of dollars worth of hamburger. Yeah.
So there you go.
Well done. Well done.
So if that happened in January,
yeah,
and then it happened again in March,
so we need to be watching.
Is it just like quarterly?
Yeah, quarterly. Internet, tell us when the next beef heist comes so that we can discuss the further antics of the hamburger heroes.
And their known modus operandi of faking a trucking company.
Yep. Though there might be other ways to steal hamburger, but this is what they've been doing.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll move on to other meats. So, coincidentally, I didn't even think that this was a good segue. We're talking about mythology today.
Ah, yes.
Well, less mythology.
That did end up being kind of a good segue.
Yeah, and folklore and things, because my senior thesis was in folklore. Tell me if my senior course, which meant your senior thesis. at the university that we went to, you had to, like, your senior year, pick from a small limited number of these count as senior courses. They're harder classes, and you'll have to write a paper as part of that is kind of your capstone. Yeah. It was not terribly much harder, but it was a little more in-depth class. Mm-hmm. I picked mine because of the teacher.
Oh, who was it?
It was Dr. Thursby.
Oh, okay.
And Dr. Thursby had taught several classes. Folklore, I mean, I gravitated toward folklore anyway. Grandpa Tolkien, was so good at folklore, and I thought this is probably a good place for a fantasy author to be. Yeah. Right? The psychology department won't let me take their upper level courses. Otherwise, that's where I'd be. I was sneaking into some of those classes anyway with my roommate. But folklore. And so Dr. Thursby taught some very good folklore classes, and I'm like, well, she's teaching a senior course this year, and it was my senior year. I'm going to take that one.
Cool. So you took folklore to help with your writing. My senior course was Joseph Conrad.
Okay.
Which I also thought would help with my writing. And all it's done is make my writing elitist and better than other people. But unpopular.
There was a senior course on Tolkien the year before I graduated, so like 2 years before you graduated. That would have been fun.
Yeah, my honors, what do they call them? The honors program
your chair.
Mentor or chair, whatever,
your honors
was Stephen Walker, who taught the Tolkien class. But I didn't take the Tolkien class from him. I took some other class from him.
Yeah. But folklore, so I happen to know a decent amount about folklore from Dr. Thursby. Her specialty was food lore.
Oh, really?
Yes, specifically Basque food lore.
That is amazing.
Yep. Well, it was really fun because you don't think of folklore and think of food lore. But a ton of our modern folklore is food lore. Like, let me ask you, are there meals, is there anything special you do for specific meals? Do you have a Sunday meal? Did your family have them? What do you eat on Christmas versus New Year's versus Thanksgiving?
We have a lot of rituals like that.
Yep. And are there stories told about the food? Like I've told one on this podcast about my grandma's mac and cheese that can't be remade.
Yeah.
That's food lore. That's the folklore. And that's where, and I had never considered it. And it was really eye-opening to me, not that I put a ton of food lore specifically, but that folklore doesn't just mean, here's the story of these kids who went into the woods and
an elf.
It
did something.
Means here's what your grandpa did and said, and here's what your family lore is, and here's what our food lore is, and here's how we do the laundry. And that sort of those habits passed down that have stories attached to them.
In line with that, one of my favorite things that I've read was I guess they may have been a modern folklorist or something, but they were talking about holiday traditions. And they said that one of the key Thanksgiving traditions is packing up the leftovers.
Yeah.
And it had never occurred to me, but yes, that is something that everyone does at Thanksgiving, and it's something we have to do because otherwise the food would go bad, but it is also indicative of the entire look how much food we have. This year has been good to us kind of Thanksgiving ritual that we all do anyway.
Who takes it? And are you making a plate for this person? Is grandma saying, go off to college with this? It's so interesting to think about all the pieces of folklore we have in our lives that aren't even the traditional kinds of folklore. And I'm really grateful for Dr. Thursby for kind of making me understand that, because I do think that made me a better writer, thinking about the different ways that we tell stories.
Well, on the subject of Joseph Conrad making my books elitist and unpopular, my 16-year-old is going through the John Cleaver books right now. And he is in the middle of book 3. And I think he just hit a part that I'm not going to say, or he may have just finished it, because he texted my daughter, "How are we not billionaires?" That's the greatest compliment I have ever received on my writing, is my 16-year-old astonished that we're not household names and filthy rich because he loves the book so much. That was a great moment for me.
That is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. So one of the other things that I kind of learned about folklore was how many stories are common to how many cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And people like to talk about the monomyth, the hero with 1,000 faces, right? That's not the most common myth that people tell you.
Is it Cinderella?
It's Cinderella.
Yeah.
How strangely, even eerily similar the different Cinderella myths are from all these different cultures recorded from centuries and millennia ago, down to like weird things like the ashes on her face and being named after the ashes, to the number of stepsisters. And they don't all share these, but basically every culture has a Cinderella myth. There are hundreds of them recorded that are independent and not influenced by one another. You go to an uncontacted tribe and talk to them, and one of the myths that they're telling is the story of Cinderella.
That's so cool.
Isn't it weird? The leaving at a certain time, and the magical powers and all of this. This is one of the stories that human beings spontaneously create. Just like in the old days, you thought that people thought that if you left meat outside, it spontaneously generated flies, right? That flies came from meat. In the similar way, if you leave human beings alone, they spontaneously create Cinderella.
Cinderella.
Yeah.
Just grows in us like a maggot.
Why is that?
I don't know. One of the things I love about the commonness of Cinderella is that we can't point to the Bible.
Yeah.
Like the monomyth is present in the Bible, in the story of Jesus and things like that. And Cinderella isn't really in the Bible anywhere.
No.
And that delights me about it. Esther is the one I was thinking of.
Esther, but you don't have the hallmarks, right? Esther is almost more of a Moses myth in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
The person from the chosen people who is separated from them maintains their roots, which is still kind of monomythic. The monomyth, you can point at the Bible, and you can point at even going back to Gilgamesh, right?
Yeah.
And be like, all right, the monomyth, this is a central pillar of kind of Western / Judeo-Christian mythology. And so when you find echoes of it in Zoroastrianism, and you find echoes of it in Christianity and Judaism, well, these are all happening in the same area. All of us have our roots in this fertile crescent. And so you'd be like, if you're religious, you're like, well, this is doctrinal. If you're non-religious, you'd be like, well, this story has just been passed down. It's an oral tradition that got written down. And then, of course, everyone keeps reading it and creating new stories about it, because you can go read Oedipus, and they did, and they rediscovered Oedipus during the Renaissance. That's what the Renaissance is about. So, of course, all of a sudden, people are writing stories that are using these Greek things. But with Cinderella, like I said, it's just like China
everywhere.
Has one that is eerily serial. But the famous Chinese one is one of the ones that's closest to the kind of Grimm's fairy tale one, where you're like, wow. And if you look at the roots of these, there seems to have been no interaction causing this to happen. We just love Cinderella.
And I wonder if a part of it is, as soon as a culture will develop any kind of class system, then they immediately tell the story of the person who broke the rules. And the poor person who got to live like a rich person because they were so good-hearted or whatever. And that might be part of the basis of it.
I'm sure that's part of it. It's a way to build a sense of fairness into a world that seems very unfair, perhaps. But that's like my number 2 most fascinating thing that I learned in my folklore classes, with number 1 being like realization that we have folklore that is not what I assumed. And number 2, this idea that we do share a lot of stories and things like that. My Dr. Thursby was actually very down on Here with 1,000 Faces.
Really?
Yeah.
It is very single-minded.
Yep. She said that in the community, and this is one person's perspective, I'm not part of the folklore community, but she said, we have a lot of problems with Campbell. Number one being that he didn't share. Her number one was he didn't cite his sources. That all this work, she says, was done by other people, and he aggregated it, which is totally fine. That's generally what happens in these
That's what a lot of research is.
But that he pretended that he'd come up with the idea and then got famous for it. And a lot of the folklorists who had spent a lot of time building these things were left out of that. She was particularly annoyed by that.
Okay.
But if you laid that aside, she said, Here Are the Thousand Faces makes its case too strongly. And instead of describing the folklore, it felt like it tried to rigidly take the folklore. Like when you look at these Cinderella myths, if you heard this and you go read them, you'll be like, okay, Brandon, I can see that they're similar, but they're not as similar as you were pretending. They're eerily similar to me, knowing how different stories are. But in some of them, she does this, and some of them, she does that. They're not all the same. And in Here Are the Thousand Faces, he tries to pretend that, and he does make
all identical.
Yeah, he does make some arguments. I've read Here Are the Thousand Faces where it's like, I know not everything fits this. He does acknowledge that, but then through most of it, he's like making this really hard point that's like, this is the myth. This is the only myth. All other myths are a part or a subset of this myth. And it feels real hard selly to a lot of them.
Yeah.
Particularly with her saying it ignores huge swaths of storytelling and folklore that doesn't fit this, that would break his narrative, and he just doesn't acknowledge it. And that was the second thing that annoyed her. And the third thing is, she said, he ignores every myth about a woman. And makes this a male myth when, the most popular myth in the world is Cinderella. And there's barely an acknowledgement of any of the female folklore when it's a legit, just huge part of the stories that we tell. So those were her three digs against Campbell.
And I think fair ones.
Yeah. Campbell, I still think Here Are the Thousand Faces is well worth a read. And it is a really interesting thing for storytellers. But
so here's my question. Do myths and folklore around the world, do they have as much cannibalism in them as the Grimm brothers? Or were the Grimm brothers just perversely fascinated by cannibalism?
That's a wonderful question. Folklorists out there, tell us, how much cannibalism, how many children getting eaten exist in all of these other mythologies. I'm going to guess that there's a decent amount of that around, knowing some Korean myths and things like that getting gobbled up by monsters that are thinly veiled representations of foreigners or of like representations of the dangers of leaving the community are going to be in all sorts of societies.
Yeah, you can't leave, and you have to follow our rules, or something will eat you.
Yeah,
and I through a role-playing game called Blood in the Banquet Hall by Banana Chan. I became acquainted with a Chinese Hong Kong horror comedy series called Mr. Vampire. Have you ever heard of Mr. Vampire?
I have not.
Chinese vampires are very different from Western vampires.
Yes, they are.
And there's this absolutely delightful series of movies that are all about these Chinese vampire hunters trying to keep them down, the Jiangxi. And it's so fun to see the same idea of, the thing that sucks blood from beyond the grave, just interpreted wildly differently.
Yep.
I love it.
I think even like my kids love the show Demon Slayer.
Oh, the anime?
Yeah, the anime. And this is Japanese, not Chinese. But and they were describing what the demons do. And I'm like, aren't those vampires? They're like, no, they're called demons. So I hope I haven't been offensive to those who love Demon Slayer. I haven't actually ever seen an episode, though my kids have watched the entire series through many, many times.
Okay.
But they sound like it's just like one of these vampire things that doesn't translate to English, because if you translate vampire, you're going to expect to have all the baggage,
certain tropes
that Western vampires have. And indeed, there are lots of anime that do use the Western tropes that are built off of this kind of gothic horror. And I could see them saying, these are really Japanese vampires, but if we translate it as vampire, they're going to expect it to be in this, so we'll just call them demons.
Yeah. I love reading about the monsters from other cultures.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember if it's Japan or Korea that has a vampire. It's a woman, and at night her head comes off, dangling tentacles, and flies around.
It actually keeps all of the intestines.
Oh, is that what the tentacles are?
I think the tentacles are the intestines. This is Southeast Asia. I'm not sure if it's Cambodian, if it's Thai, one of these, but I know it's down in the Southeast Asian quadrants. Maybe our people can tell us.
Cool.
I want to say the big B movie that does that's kind of famous in the bad movie genre is called Mystics of Bali. Can you look up Mystics of Bali for me and tell me
does it have the floating head vampire in it?
The floating head vampire that trails entrails.
Yes. I also think if we're looking at the Japanese one, it's a Nuke Kubi, I think, or Nuke Kubi, from what I remember from D&D stuff. But
you don't remember that from D&D. You remember it from anime.
No, actually.
Don't pretend.
No, first edition. We have all the weird myth books.
That's true. We do in first edition.
So,
but you are an anime guy. Have you watched Demon Slayer?
I have watched Demon Slayer.
Are they more like vampires, or or did my kids just describe them poorly?
It's an accurate enough description, I think, for what they're going for.
All right, you got Mystics of Bali pulled up. Did I get the title of that correctly?
You did get the title of it correctly. It's
one of those ones that we should watch sometime for Bad Movie Night.
Oh, that would be great.
Doing a quick look, I don't see anything.
Maybe it's not Mystics of Bali.
I mean, this movie looks fascinating.
I don't think it's Ninja 3 because you would remember that.
Oh, I mean, okay. I pulled up the what do they call it? The poster, and it is a floating head with all of their intestines.
Yeah, okay.
Mystics of Bali.
Mystics of Bali. I think that is also one that has a very, very unsettling scene that I don't think we can describe on here, but I'll tell you afterward because you'll love it.
I'm excited.
There's a very unsettling scene in Mystics of Bali that and it's just a very bad B movie, and I haven't seen it, but I know about it. We should watch it sometime.
Okay.
But yes, that's whatever that thing is. So Bali is Southeast Asia, but it is what country?
I don't know.
Google says that is in Indonesia.
Indonesia.
Okay.
So there you are.
Sweet.
So there we go. Yeah, the horror from other countries. If you want to, the mystical creatures. Our friend Bryce Moore wrote a book called Vodnik.
Yeah,
which is a pretty fun book about a monster from Slovakian monster that lives in lakes and steals people's souls and keeps them in teacups.
Yeah,
which is just so delightfully European and. It's very Grimm's fairy tale, except it's not a Grimm's fairy tale type thing, right? Just like, why teacups? What's going on? Like, people in the past were as weird as we are.
Yeah.
But the weird stories they would tell would become these like legends of folklore that would be passed along forever. Imagine if the dumb things we said on this podcast turned into
myths. If Food Heist Prison becomes a whole host of stories that people will tell their grandchildren 1,000 years from now.
Yeah. I also am very fascinated in kind of a science fiction way of the Buck Rogers sort of thing, where you go to the future and this idea, things that were normal to us, there's been an apocalypse, the records are gone, and so now you have legends about this. Buck Rogers was very famous for this. There's that great scene in Reign of Fire, where Darth
they
Vader,
tell the story of Star Wars.
Of Star Wars. I did this in Skyward with the Lion King and Hamlet. I mixed them on purpose to be like, they don't know the difference between Lion King and Hamlet anymore. Stuff like that. I have a blast with that. Like our lives becoming folklore. I mean, the whole Mistborn series is about fantasy book that then becomes mythology, folklore, and things for
the next trilogy.
For the next trilogy.
Yeah, which is so awesome. Have you ever read a little children's book called Motel of the Mysteries?
No, I haven't.
It's like a picture book. But it's archaeologists in the future who have unearthed a modern day motel, and they're going through it, and they assume that it is a burial site because there was a body in the bed.
Yeah.
And so everything is ascribed great religious significance.
Oh, that's
and
delightful.
It's absolutely wonderful.
Oh, that's great. What a great premise for a story. That feels very Ray Bradbury-esque in the best of ways.
Yeah.
And something else that people can read if this sort of discussion, you're like, oh, I find this really cool. If you, for some reason, haven't read Uprooted and Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, I would highly recommend those as kind of fantasy books that are making new mythology, but that feels like it would be mythology from this kind of Slavic sort of feel. They're very cool. And Naomi's a great writer. Not my nemesis because she's too nice, so I had to pick Scalzi to be my nemesis instead. But
all nominated for the award at the same time.
Yeah, no, she was the year before.
Oh, was she?
So I got beat by Naomi and by John. Right?
Okay,
so
in the 2 years
in the 2 years I was eligible for. What do they even call that award anymore?
I don't know.
I was trying to remember it in my class because I was telling the story. I was talking about Scalzi being my nemesis, and I couldn't remember because it used to be the Campbell, but they decided to change the award, and
when they changed it, they did not just call it the Best New Writer Hugo.
No, which is what for all of my life.
Yeah,
people have been saying, why isn't this just Best New Writer Hugo? Is it really that bad that we would give out a Hugo for Best New Writer? And
it's ridiculous.
It's one of those silly things that someone should have changed years ago, but now it has momentum and no one wants to be the one to change it. So in a lot of ways, it's, I think, a more not more prestige, but I think it's like being the best new writer and getting the attention, like the stuff that Naomi and Scalzi did and breaking out, like that's well worthy of a Hugo, if that makes sense.
It matters so much to you at that point in your career.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, when we're handing Shannon McGuire her 97th Hugo because she's an incredible writer, you know, she deserves them because I love her and she's great, but it doesn't help as much as Naomi Novik getting that
right at the beginning
best new thing.
I'm up against Shannon again.
Really?
Every time I get nominated, I'm against Shannon, right? And the one time I beat her was for Emperor's Soul. And so I am hoping that maybe this year I'll be able to repeat that. But she's beaten me more times than I've beaten her now. So
which series is it?
It's Stormlight.
Well, hers.
Oh, hers?
Because it's not the
she's already won for
children one. That already won.
Yeah,
some new thing. She writes so much.
Yeah, and I'm up against Adrian Tchaikovsky as well, who also just writes so many things.
The first time not the first time, but at one point several years ago, I was in Seattle for something, and I was having lunch with Shannon, and she said, "If you ever need to, come to Seattle, please stay with me. Bring your whole family and stay with me." And I'm like, "Yeah, everyone says that." She said, "No, I really mean it." So a few years later, I took her up on it. My whole family was passing through on our way up to like Orcas Island or something, and I said, "Can we spend a night at your house?" And she said, "Yes, absolutely. I won't be there, but, my mom will give you the key." And so we got there and walked up to the front door so that I could ring. And the front door of her house is kind of surrounded by hedges. And you walk almost into a tunnel of hedges. And right inside the hedges, there is a life-size statue of a velociraptor.
Nice.
And scared the crap out of my daughter. It was incredible.
It's encrypted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And Tyrant Philosophers for Adrian Tchaikovsky. Southern Reach by Jeff Vandermeer. Burning Kingdoms by Tasha Shuri. I don't know her.
I don't either.
And then Rebecca Roanhorse.
I need to look her up.
That's some stiff competition.
All of those are great.
Yeah. Every time it's the series award though. So the things that get nominated are people who've been consistently
really popular,
good,
consistent, great writers.
And so it's kind of a hard award to win for that reason. I think this is my third nomination in series for Stormlight. So
see, I would still vote for you in that crowd.
Yeah.
But if it was last year and you're up against Fonda Lee, I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's all right. They all have, not all of them, but I know Sean and Adrian both have series Hugos already, and they're just kind of moving through their series. Surely, the Stormlight Archive, for my first one for a series, can rival Sean in getting her third or fourth Hugo for series.
Perhaps.
My
one and only week as a New York Times bestseller was on the series list.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, for partials.
Also, I can't answer. The award is officially now called the Astounding Award for Best New Writer.
Astounding, named after the magazine instead of of an editor. Okay, yeah, it should just be the best Hugo for Best New Writer. But we're not the first people to say that. We won't be the last ones. It'll probably never change.
Yeah.
Dan, you had some stiff competition for yours as well, looking when Serial Killer was up for it.
Yeah. Who beat you, Dan, for the Campbell?
It was
Lev
what's
Grossman.
his name?
Lev Grossman.
Yes,
Oh yeah,
The Magicians.
Oh man. Yeah.
Like there was no chance that I was going to beat the Magicians. And I can't remember who it was the other year, but
I can probably find it. Do you know what year it was?
It was either the year before or after that one.
You're only eligible for 2 years.
Gotcha. I don't see you before or after on this list.
Was I only nominated once?
According to what I'm looking at.
I am retroactively offended. How dare they?
There you are. How's that, Ben?